Because the truth is that when we go into these psychedelic spaces, it's a little bit of chaos,
No, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And we if we try to steer the ship too much, then it can create internal resistance to what's actually showing up. And what's actually showing up is what our subconscious mind is manifesting for us to actually come face to face with. I am a sacred medicine mentor, guide, facilitator, and educator. And I bring a lot of intentionality to the work that I do with sacred medicines and psychedelics. So combining these practices and these medicines with really solid preparation, integration, and then practices to really create the foundation for a whole and healthy life.
I was going to ask right shortly before we hit the recording button. I secretly hit the recording button unbeknownst to you, of which I'm very sorry. If you've noticed how your clients, may I call them clients really?
Say that one more time.
May I call them clients? The people that refer to you are the clients of yours? How do you refer to them? Clients, yeah. Have you noticed their attitude to you change after the ceremony is done? I would imagine a person who is close to you during one of those really sacred ceremonies almost becoming a mother figure in a way. Yeah, how would you go about that? Have you noticed any attitude change?
I mean, we go into such sacred space that there's a certain intimacy and a certain closeness that can develop through that, and not in a meshed way, but in a way where, you know, taking people into these really profound and sacred spaces, there's just a real closeness that develops through that.
Yeah. And that's beautiful. Would you say it's one of the purposes eventually of psychedelic medicine to make us realize the ultimate connection that we share between each other?
Yeah, the interconnectedness for sure. You know, a lot of ceremonies will take place in a group setting where and I personally do not facilitate these types of experiences, but a lot of the experiences that I partake in and that I find so transformational are group settings. And it's, you know, we're all going into our own personal experience. And then over the process of sharing those experiences and sharing our life experience and really being witnessed in all of that, the most beautiful parts and the most painful parts, there's something that is very healing in that. And really with everyone's experiences, all the things relate to those things in one way or another.
What is the most common requests that you've been noticing from people who refer to you? Should it be some kind of a personal trauma? Should it always be specifically something negative? Or can a person that superficially doesn't experience any turbulence still resort to you just, you know, with the purpose of improving his life? What do you think is the common request?
It really varies. So the work that I do is much more integrated in a transformational process and in working with other holistic practices. So the very foundational practices of, you know, eating, drinking, sleeping, meditation, yoga, supplementation, all these foundational practices. I work with people to really create more wholeness and stability. And then the medicine work that I facilitate is a part of that transformation and going into more of the psychological and the spiritual aspects of what might be holding them back in life. So the work that I do in particular is really geared around change, opening and an opportunity for deeper levels of healing and change. And the reason that people are drawn to this work is really varied. You know, it can be for health reasons. It can be for a lack of connection to their self, feeling kind of a certain amount of melancholy or numbness just around their experience of life, and wanting to open up to greater possibilities and deepening into greater connections with self and with God, universe, creation,
whatever that spiritual element really is, right? It appears to be different for different people. Interesting. So your approach is more of a holistic one, right? It's more of a complex one where it's not just the ceremony, the ritual itself, but there must have been something preceding, right? Like some kind of bonding experience, as you said, like eating, drinking, right? It's not like just jumping into the trip, so to say, straight away. Right.
Well, we want to make sure that before going into any big psychedelic experience, any type of big journey, that someone is really stable and kind of grounded in their experience in their life, and that they have tools that they can go to during the ceremony and after as well to integrate and to ground those experiences that one has in the psychedelic space.
Right. Yeah, I feel like
part of that is, embodiment practices, yoga, meditation, breath work, nervous system regulation tools.
Yeah, evidently that appears to be an integral part. Would you say that people who've been through a trip in a way and who later haven't done any sort of, let's say, categorization of whatever happened, they didn't do the work that would allow them to truly and carefully, meticulously go through what happened in the trip, would you say that in that case it's almost pointless to have had that trip? Do you think that homework is absolutely necessary for certain people after the ceremony is over?
I wouldn't say it's pointless. People can have life-changing experiences that, even with outside of, proper or intentional set and setting, just due to the nature of these molecules and what they shift and what they change in our consciousness. It does help to have the preparation and the post-journey integration to really translate what we experience in the psychedelic state, which really is so beyond words, beyond everyday comprehension, and so abstract from our normal experiences. Often it can be challenging to know what to do with that, how to make sense of it, and how to take aligned action so that we can really change ourselves from within and start to use that to shift our external reality so that we are able to create a life more intentionally based off of the lessons and the healing that we get during the psychedelic experience.
That's beautiful. Do you think, well, obviously, I imagine these ceremonies vary from person to person. It's highly intimate experience, as you've said. But would you say that in majority of those cases, having one ceremony only opens the door to eventual second ceremony? What, according to your practices?
It depends. It really depends on the individual and what their experience was like and what their goals are. Some people sit with medicine and they have, one of the most profound life-changing experiences of their life. And at the same time, they're like, I'm good. I'm good for now. Right. And then other people go in and they experience something and it's almost this remembrance. It's like they've been looking for this and seeking this and yearning for this their entire life. They get the kind of the psychedelic bug bites
which
them.
Doesn't come to you that often. It's not like with any other substances that you can abuse, I imagine, right? It's like one ceremony could give you the effect for 6 months, for a year, right? And you will be totally fine.
Yeah, and some people are, they do have those experiences and they experience something that is so profound and so novel that they want to return to that. They want to explore those altered states more frequently.
That's beautiful. I've been personally lately thinking a lot about how, because when we had a first kind of introduction call, I mentioned that I would like to center that conversation around mushrooms specifically, since this is the only psychedelic substance that I'm personally experienced with. And I've been lately thinking about how mushrooms almost mysteriously at one point started pulling me back into doing another trip. Have you noticed anything like that? And do you find, that's going to be a very hard to articulate question, but do you find a little bit of mysticism in the way how mushrooms are able to remind you after certain time passes, to remind you what you've once done with them and what they're capable of doing? Do you find a little bit of mysticism in this whole process, or do you lean towards purely scientific, like conscious-based approach towards mushrooms? No mystery, purely science, or do you think there's still the spiritual realm in these substances?
Oh, the spiritual realm and the spiritual qualities of these medicines are really the essence of what makes them so transformational. There certainly is a unique personality and unique essence to the natural medicines in particular, that they have a higher intelligence and their own personality that really we get to experience in working with them. And the work that I do is, yes, I do some journey work with larger doses, but I also do a lot of work with microdosing and mini dosing. And through that process, that's in a way to, one, get started to develop a relationship with the medicine in a smaller dose, right? In a more consistent protocol, in a more consistent way that is more integrative with your day-to-day life. And then you get to really experience like the essence of that medicine and get to know it a lot more.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love how you said that it's all about almost the personality that those plants seem to have. When it comes to microdosing, would you say there's a final goal in doing microdosing, or is it really about the journey and just obtaining whatever is given during the term of microdosing? What is the final goal, if there's one?
Microdosing is one of the most versatile and, gently powerful ways that you can work with medicine, because it can be so integrated into your day-to-day life. And the effects of microdosing are very different than taking a large dose. You can't really compare the two in what the outcomes are and what the effects are. And, people microdose for such a variety of reasons, whether it's improvement in mood, improvement in, their creative output, thinking in more creative ways, divergent ways. And there's a social connectivity aspect to it as well, where it almost acts as a pro-social supplement that very subtly gets us out of our own bubble, our own way of relating, and encourages us to rely on other people and reach out to other people and feel more comfortable in our own sovereign self to be able to actually have the confidence and the ability to reach out. Yeah, and there's a lot of nuance within that. Like we could go in so many ways in exploring that.
Yeah, like different strains. When talking particularly about mushrooms, obviously different like strains of psilocibin mushrooms hit you differently and gives you I would imagine different impact. I remember that brief period of me microdosing. The best outcome that I am now able to remember is that it made me considerably braver in any regard, and it wasn't like this silly bravery, it just made me kind of more somehow mentally equipped to deal with whatever was thrown my way. Did I do that right? Is that a common outcome when microdosing?
Very, very common, and it makes us more easeful and more kind of accepting and receptive to what's happening in our life, where we don't take things so personally. It's like things kind of roll off us a little bit more gracefully. And there's some science behind that as well. It is a very, it's a very complicated process.
Yeah, you could decipher it, I bet, right? Yeah. Each and every journey and ceremony could be personally deciphered, and a lot of things, sort of like dreams, don't you think? Like if one goes about kind of deciphering dreams, a lot of things could be sort of extrapolated, I feel like. Yeah. That's beautiful. How did your personal story begin? When was the first time somehow you got introduced to this medicine, these plants? Was it on purpose, by accident? How did it go?
It was, thank you, Great Spirit. It was kind of just something that showed up in my field. And I'm in my 40s now, and I was in my 20s and 30s more in the more conventional world. I had been following a more conventional work and life path and was doing really, really well professionally. But on the inside, it was a little bit of a mess. So I was, drinking every day and abusing food, abusing exercise. I was just really numbing out based off of my own personal upbringing and, complex trauma that I experienced at different stages in life. And I did end up getting sober first. So that was kind of the first thing that changed in my life. I got sober, and from there, my brain turned back on, and the veil of depression that I was just carrying around in my aura started to lift, and I became really hungry for information and more things that I could start doing on the personal development side of things to feel even better. Because I was feeling good for the first time in 15 years during that whole stretch of numbing out. And I listened to podcasts and started reading blogs and following thought leaders in the space on really optimizing the health and the all things in my life. And I heard about ayahuasca first by listening to some podcasts. And I knew immediately, as soon as I started hearing trip reports of that medicine, that it was something that I needed to do. So I started making trips down to Peru and Costa Rica to sit with medicine. And really, as soon as I started changing and healing, there was a lot of healing that needed to happen. The healing to help the root causes of why I was numbing out to begin with. And from there, that path led me to many places and many medicine experiences and many amazing teachers, and
shamans, right?
Yeah.
So the first, now obviously ayahuasca ceremony should be guided, right? No, totally not recommended to perform anything of that kind individually alone, right? It must be a part of a procedure, right?
It's very important to be in a container that's being facilitated and with shamans that are very well trained in a particular lineage. And a lot of the healing that happens in that ceremonial container, it's a combination of the medicine, the music, the icaros, the facilitation. It's very important to do that in a professional setting. Yeah.
What do you think about people that claim to be shaman yet haven't done zero psychedelic procedures? That's a bit off topic, but I'm just curious to know your opinion.
I think that's a contradiction. I don't think that someone can be a shaman, can be a medicine facilitator if they don't have deep experience of navigating those terrains themselves. I think that that's very risky and unethical in many ways.
Unfair, I believe. Yeah, I'm asking because I happen to have recorded a conversation with a person who claims to be one, and he confessed having zero, rituals done. And to me, I didn't point out to that, but it's been kind of bugging me ever since I recorded that episode. And I kept thinking to myself, how is that you claim to be a shaman, yet having no connection to the nature, basically, because what are those things if not the representation of the nature in the most beautiful way? So that brings me to another question, so to speak. And I time to time run into people like that. So do you, I believe, right? So how do you go about those people? You obviously don't try to change their mind, right? But how do you view those people? That's my question.
So those are not the type of people that are really attracted to the work that I do. Yeah. So they get screened out pretty quick.
Yeah,
they start engaging in conversation with me, just based off of the nature of what I do and how I do that. And I think that I really honor everyone where they're at in their journey. And people are motivated by personal motivations and are navigating things in the way that the way that they're called to. And I think that everybody deserves to have freedom over their own consciousness and how they want to explore that. One of my core values when it comes to this work is education. So I think it's important to have good information available to people that's easily accessible, and that for everyone that is called to work with medicine, it's important to do your own research and have an intention behind why it is you're doing what you do. And if the intention is to have a novel experience and to really just trip out and have a good time, if that's what your intention is, then you can approach the medicines in that way. And your outcome, what you get out of the medicine, is probably going to be a reflection of the intention that you have going into it.
Yeah, and it always astounds me how a person discovers these substances. Like you did, you said something like, thanks, Great Spirit, or something like that. So there was almost this element of this random element, the element of unpredictability. At one point, you must have been pretty much an inch away from not making the decision. So do you think when a person is pulled towards those substances, do you find a bit, again, of mystery in there? I don't mean to be overly kind of trying to look at the substances from a different perspective. Do you think it's almost like they find us when we are ready? Somehow they make their way to us. Have you thought about that? The process of discovering, becoming excited and curious, hungry for more in context of those substances. How do you go about that? That's a very hard question, but,
Yeah, I absolutely believe that. And there have been medicines that have come into my field, such as Iboga and MDMA. And when they originally came into my field, I was, there was an aversion there. There was, that doesn't sound like something that I would want to ever do, right? And then many years later, as I have continued on my path, I have changed that perspective at certain very specific time increments when I was ready for it. And my consciousness, my higher self, my spirit actually needed and was ready for the teachings of those particular medicines. So I do think that these things show up when we're ready for them and when we need them. And the most important thing in that process is really using our own inner guidance and our own intuition about what medicine is right for us at what time, and not letting other people give us advice on, oh, you got to try this. Like, I did this and it was amazing. And if someone tries to give you a recommendation like that, and your initial response is, I don't know, that doesn't sound like something, then trust your intuition. And if there's a curiosity that is planted by that recommendation, and you do some more research and you really sit with it and you feel into it, and you do feel like you are being called to the medicine, then trust that as well.
Yeah, the society pressure does play a part, I feel like, in person's journey towards psychedelics. That's interesting. People can be either highly supportive or very otherwise. And that's interesting. And I've always thought a lot about if I should really listen carefully to those voices. So excluding like certain medical precautions and conditions, do you think everybody will undeniably benefit from partaking in those ceremonies? Or do you think there are still people that won't have to do it and shouldn't do it?
I don't know that everybody is ready to sit with large doses of medicine. I think it's very much a personal decision. And again, I never recommend that people sit with medicine. If they're not being called to do that, and if they are not ready or stable in themselves to do that, I don't necessarily think it's a good idea.
So you never directly tell a person who appears to be a particularly fitting choice, because I'm sure you've interacted with those people, by looking at whom you go, yeah, this one would definitely greatly benefit from taking some mushrooms, but you never allow yourself to say, yeah, maybe you should consider taking mushrooms. You never allow that.
Well, I present information and I present options and I present the possible benefits and the possible risks. And give them the resources that they need to be able to come to that decision on their own. When it comes to, if someone feels that they're really ready to start sitting with medicine and they're not really sure what medicine they are being called to, again, I'll present that information and I can make a recommendation based off of where they're at, what their past experience and their past history is, and what their goals and intentions are coming out of it. I certainly can make a recommendation, but at the end of the day, it really is up to that person to decide what's right for them.
Yeah, right. That's smart. Yeah, that's wise. Beautiful. What would you consider high dosage of mushrooms?
So it depends on the strain of mushrooms, because there is a lot of variability in the strength and even looking at different strains, the concentration of the active ingredient, which is psilocybin, which is converted to psilocin. So psilocin is what actually brings on the experience and the trip. So it depends on the strain that you're working with. So all that being said, anywhere between 1.5 grams upwards of, 8, 9, 20, 30 grams. Some people take very, very high doses of psilocybin mushrooms. And it's always good to start on the low end of things and to gradually work your way up to higher doses so that you can get comfortable with navigating those altered states. And an important part of getting the most out of any type of psychedelic experience is the ability to surrender and to let go and to stay somewhat open to whatever is being presented in terms of the content. And if you start out at a lower dose and then build your way up, you start to develop the skills for navigating that particular space, depending on what medicine. Every medicine opens up and brings you into a different realm. right?
Yeah.
And through that experimentation of starting lower and then building your way up, you gain experience in navigating that space, and you also gain more trust. So one, trust in the medicine to take you to the places that are intended for your highest good and your highest healing. And two, like, trust in yourself. Trust in yourself that you're going to be okay, and that you're going to be able to be resourced to deal with whatever comes up.
You know, when you say to be able to trust yourself and to almost persuade yourself, almost sort of brainwash yourself into this trust to yourself, this is so big, whether you're on a trip, in a trip or not, because it's like one element that so many people lack. And I feel like it's an almost underlying reason why so many people are a little bit skeptical about those mushrooms, is because maybe deep down they understand that there's this element of self-trust is just inherently gone. And man, like, even those people who do consider themselves trusting themselves still miss it at times. Let me ask you a personal, for me, question, and maybe you're gonna completely and utterly disrespect it. At least, do not vocalize it. I'll have to ask you. So, you know, when I did the first mushroom trip, I completely and totally neglected whatever you've just said about building it up, checking it out slowly but surely. I just jumped straight into a so-called heroic 5-gram dosage of pink buffalo, and it resulted in a whole tattoo sleeve in mushrooms in my hand and plenty other big, big conclusions that I've been able to make for myself. But ever since I did that, there has been built this bar in my mind that doesn't allow me to go lower. So I want to ask you, as an experienced person in that field, what does it tell about me? The fact that I do not allow myself to trip on a lower dosage. I want to either stick to that same bar or maybe even go higher. How do I go about that? Should I just learn how to kind of kill? Is that ego really speaking, making me, restricting me from lowering it? What is that in your opinion? That's probably really stupid, right?
No, it's I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think that it's ego based. I think you had a life-changing, profound experience.
Absolutely. Yeah.
At a certain dose with a certain strain of mushrooms, and it really changed you. And if you are going to go back into that space, you want to have just as profound of another experience.
Yeah.
So I respect that.
That's wow.
Okay.
Thank you. I've been always viewing it as some sort of a malfunction of myself in a way. Like, why wouldn't I? But it's interesting because you said you've got to be at most equipped with knowledge and experience. You've listened to a lot of theory before you jumped into it. So did I, but I feel like also sometimes the more you listen about that, the more you become a little bit more resistant. Have you experienced yourself or with any of your clients, like the more they were getting into that, the more trip reports they've read, the more podcasts they've listened, the more skeptical they've grown? Have you ever witnessed anything like that?
Well, I think that there's a downside of listening to other people's trip reports. And, I, in particular, it's something that I steer away from, talking too much about
me too.
Exactly what my experience is, because then it can build false expectations for people on what to expect. And I've seen a lot of people kind of get disappointed after going into an experience or seeing the visions or, getting visited by entities and ancestors. There can be a little bit of a disappointment if you hear too many of these really, out of this world trip reports.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, I know what you're saying. It's almost vitally important to stay away from those. It's like time to time when I'm kind of curious, maybe one or two, just to get a basic glimpse of that, but not getting too deep in that. Yeah. When it comes to doing psilocybin big dosages, should a person have a particular trouble in mind going into that procedure, having a particular, it's like visit to a doctor. Do you think you've got to know exactly what bothers you, or is it better to just sort of let that go and be open for the mushrooms to show whatever they have to?
I don't think that there is any one right way to do it. I think that it can be helpful to have an intention, but not to grasp too tightly to that. Because the truth is that when we go into these psychedelic spaces, it's a little bit of chaos, right? Yeah. And if we try to steer the ship too much, then it can create internal resistance to what's actually showing up. And what's actually showing up is what our subconscious mind is manifesting for us to actually come face to face with. So the intention is helpful if when you are in the space, in the psychedelic space, and you want something to return to, if you get into like a thought loop that could be not so helpful. So paranoia is something that comes up a lot. Fear comes up a lot. And if we feed the fear with our intention, then it can keep us in a challenging place longer than is actually helpful. So having an intention and having tools that we can use in the space, whether it's, our breath, doing some breath work to bring us back into the body, or a mantra, repeating a specific set of words or affirmations to bring us back into the safety of our own self, and to really, nurture and care for ourselves a little bit in a loving way. Those are all good things, good tools to have in preparation before going in, to allow us to help, just bring us back and not get too lost out there.
Yeah, to ground us. That is provided that you even remember your own name, which I wasn't privileged, going into that one. So yeah. I mean, but it's interesting because there is this department in your brain that still keeps itself pretty grounded. And I think that's what restricts you from doing something. See, I've happened to have a conversation with a person who said I would never do mushrooms in a flat on a high floor. Because what if I go out of the window? And not like it's not a legit concern, right? You've got to be reasonable. But I just, there must be something in your brain that wouldn't allow you to do some damage, don't you think?
I don't know. People do crazy things on medicine, and it really depends on the psychological state of the individual. And it's important to, when you are working with a large dose of medicine, for your safety, to have someone with you, a trip sitter or a guide or a facilitator. It's something that I absolutely highly recommend. It's very important. And in particular, when you're getting started working with any medicine, if you have a relationship with a medicine that you've cultivated and developed for many years, then, at your own discretion, at your own comfort level, you can curate experience for yourself, but I do advise people to use a lot of caution and err on the side of safety.
Now, on one of the final notes, there are, I think, at least two more questions that I want to steal your time for. Things that we see, particularly on those so-called heroic dosages, and here, but specifically see. Have you often thought about their origin? Because the way it appears to me is that there are people who claim that it's almost a self-defense mechanism of the plant that restricts people and animals from damaging the plant, which probably sounds legit and might be so. Doesn't mean that it's useless for us, even though that being a defense mechanism. So do you think that those things that we see, those plants, they allow our brain to open a door to something else that is otherwise restricted to us? I don't know, whether it be dimensions or realities, whatever that is. Do you think they just act as a little door, little getaway? Or do you think it's just purely the brain kind of glitch, which then has an impactful effect on ourselves, but still being nothing but a brain glitch? How do you go about that?
I think it's both. I think that these medicines can open up our doors of perception. Yeah. So if you think about how we experience the world in our everyday, day-to-day waking state, we have, 5 senses, right? And then some like more subtle 6 senses, 7 senses, that is what is filtering information through all of this. Our senses filter information that we then perceive through our mind and our body. And when we're taking psychedelic medicine, those doors of perception open up. They open up our senses to perceive more than we're typically able to in a normal state. So I think a lot of what we're experiencing is having access to information that is usually being filtered out. So both in the dimension that we live in and that we travel through as we're navigating our day-to-day, and then higher dimensions as well. And then to your second part of that question, yes, I think that a lot of the content that arises is coming from our subconscious mind. And that's where a lot of the healing comes from as well, bringing up past experiences and past, challenging experiences that then get stored in the body somatically as well. And it brings up those experiences so that we can re-engage with them through a different perspective, looking at them through a different lens, and to reframe them, and also to release some of the emotional charge that they have through seeing them in a different way, and almost reprogramming them and letting go of a lot of that stored emotional energy.
Yeah, so once again, they are showing us what must be seen compared to what we want to witness. Yeah. What's the highest psilocybin dosage you've personally done, if that's not too personal?
No, the highest I've done is 7 grams of penis envy mushrooms.
Must have been life-changing, right?
It was wild, man. Like, it was comparable to an ayahuasca experience. It was that psychedelic and that profound. There was it was a good one. Interesting.
A lot of visuals, right?
Oh yeah, just and portals opening and source code, and just a lot of information coming through that my brain, it was almost felt like technology, like digital information that was coming through that my brain, who's not a technologist, really couldn't make sense of. But I still got the codes. I got the downloads, and they kind of find their way to work through us in their own way.
How long did that last? I imagine solid 4 or 5 hours.
Oh man, it was like a full day thing.
Wow.
It was like a 7-hour trip.
And was there at one point a moment of almost no return when you really kind of understood that you've totally lost it all? When it got kind of scary at one point, was there a moment like that?
No, I was prepared. Yeah.
Wow, that's good. That's nice.
There were at points where I was ready for it to be over. I was like, man, I want this to kind of transition. I want to come home, but
it's almost as if they test you at one point, like they really want to see what you're made of. Have you experienced so-called ego death?
Yes.
Yeah, you have. Man, it's such a pity that we're running out of time. I mean, I should have started with this question in the beginning. I feel like, yeah, well, maybe we'll get into that. So getting back briefly on a final note, getting back to that 7 grams, what conclusions did you make afterwards? You know, I'd be curious to know, because I made a hell of a conclusion after 5 grams. Was there anything really life transformative after it let you go?
I'm trying to think back to that particular trip. You know, one of the common takeaways and common teachings, and it was definitely a part of that one as well, is that we are so powerful as these consciousness holding avatars, and the power that we have to create our reality. And that our reality truly is an external reflection of our inner state. And that we have the power to really create anything that we desire in our lives. Or the more 3D of having an idea that we translate into words and actions to create an effect, but also on the more like in the quantum, right? In the realms where time and space cease to exist, that we really do have the power based off of consciousness and the reality of consciousness to co-create in a much more creative way.
That was a profound description, of which I'm very grateful, and the pleasure is mine. I am deeply grateful that we've recorded this episode, and most importantly, I'm also pretty grateful to you generally that people like yourself exist, because I can only imagine how many wonderful, grateful people there are around you to whom you've provided. I don't know, it's like I thought about, I was privileged with having a good company doing that trip first time, obviously, which almost accidentally happened. But if there are people that hold it as their profession to navigate trippers through this chaotic and oftentimes mad, crazy process, this is wonderful. This is truly beautiful. So, Pritam, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.